Welcome to the 31st Annual Writers' Symposium by the Sea at Point Loma Nazarene University. I'm Dean Nelson on the journalism faculty, and tonight we have the privilege of talking to the great George Saunders. He writes, not yet.
Oh, wait.
I think I had them in class, you know. Let's do this again. Tonight we have the privilege of talking with the great George Saunders. He writes short stories, essays for places like The New Yorker, GQ, and elsewhere, and novels such as Lincoln and the Bardo, and more recently, Vigil. He's won pretty much every award there is for writing. He's one of those most beloved writers in the world, and he seems to be everywhere these days. And now he's at the Writers' Symposium. George Saunders, welcome to the Writers' Symposium.
It's so nice to be here.
So you were a delivery driver for your father's restaurant. You played guitar in a band. You read Atlas Shrugged. You went to engineering school. You worked in oil fields in Indonesia. You worked as a knuckle puller at a slaughterhouse. You were a roofer, a convenience store clerk. You wrote some stories, and poof, you're at the Writers' Symposium. Did I miss anything?
No, thank you, and good night.
It's been delightful.
Yeah.
I just think you've lived. You know, all of those things have contributed to how the things you write about, and what you write, how you write.
Yes.
And is any one of those more influential?
No, it was kind of the process of learning what our culture was by having it hit me on the head over and over again, and kind of going through just those moments where money is tight, and you can sort of see the abyss. And you realize the abyss doesn't care if you fall into it. That was deep, and I think I kind of suppressed it for a number of years and tried to do Hemingway, you know, in Amarillo, Texas, that kind of thing. And then when I finally discovered a technical way to write, which was basically to free up and be funny, all that stuff kind of came flooding in, all the sort of hard knock experiences.
Yeah, because it really comes through. It just feels like you know the working life. That does come through.
Yeah.
But I want to start with a high school teacher. I think you said she showed film strips of writers?
Yes.
And there was something about that energized you?
Well, there's something about her. Her name was Sherry Lindblom, and she was so funny and beautiful and really trusted us, but she was pretty strict. So the idea was you were to mind your manners, but I learned that if I could make a joke at the right minute, she would kind of be like, and then when I made the joke, she'd just give me a little smile, you know? And it was all about timing. If I had thought the joke up before, it wouldn't work. If I let it sit there for just a second too long, it wouldn't work. So that was one thing. But then she also had real deep respect for writers. And she saw it as, I think at one point she said it was like the culture's eyes looking back on itself. So she showed these very kind of cheesy, you know, those old film strips. But one was, I think it was like Nathaniel Hawthorne talking to some neighborhood girls or something. It was really weird. He was standing at a fence gesturing, and they were looking at him. But this teacher...
And you longed for that.
I just wanted to be him talking to the...
Yeah.
But this Miss Lindblom really, or Miss Williams as she was at the time, really admired whatever he was doing. She thought it was central. And I really took note of that. Kind of the idea that you could go out into your culture, whatever it was, and whatever you found there was valid, and then you could turn around and kind of talk to the culture about that. That was long before I kind of knew I wanted to be a writer. That was something that really struck me.
Cool. And there was a teacher even before that who gave you a copy of Johnny Tremain, I think. What was it about that book?
Well, it was deep, because this was in third grade in Catholic school, in all these hot nuns.
May I just say I've never heard that sentence uttered before.
It was a very special school, but there's a nun named Sister Lynette who was younger, and she used to let me come after class and talk to her, and she'd tell me about her girlhood in Kansas. But I'm like, Kansas? You're a nun. You didn't have a girlhood, you know.
Yeah.
But at one point she said this amazing sentence to me for a young Catholic boy. She said, me and the other nuns have been discussing you in the convent. First of all, you talk in there, that was one thing. But that you would talk about me was amazing. So then she said, I've got this book, and she's holding Johnny Tremaine with the Caldecott medal facing out, you know. And she said, the other nuns don't think you can handle this, but I think you can. I'm like, give me that book, you know.
Yeah.
So, and actually, it was life-changing because Esther Forbes is a great stylist, and she would do things with the language that even as a third grader I picked up. So for example, there's a part where she's describing how in the harbor, seagulls that were sleeping on the rocks overnight wake up with the sun, okay? And the sentence she used was, on rocky isles, gulls, I can't say it, gulls woke. On rocky isles, gulls woke. But she left the comma out. And even at that age, I'm like, oh, that's better. Without the comma, that image burst in my head. And I just noticed that. So
You noticed that at 8 years old?
I honestly did. I knew it was wrong. And I no, I knew it was wrong, but I knew it was better. And that was weird. And then the other thing that happened is that language, that very distinctive language, got in my head, and I could do it. So I'd be walking around the school and narrating everything in her voice. So at that point, I didn't even think we didn't know any artists in our neighborhood, so I didn't think there could be an actual Esther Forbes. I mean, she lives somewhere in Boston or something. But so it was the effect of the language that I kind of viscerally noted. Then many years later on, oh, that's what you do. You micro-choose in a phrase. You exert so much control that some essential part of yourself gets transmitted.
Yeah, very cool. And then you discovered Kurt Vonnegut.
Later, much later.
Yeah, later. And I think what got you was that you had this sense of if it was going to be great art or great writing, it had to be incomprehensible.
Right.
And then you read Vonnegut, who is so clear and also has some just absurd, vulgar stuff in it,
Yeah.
which you've kind of accepted that
I've
mantle,
inherited
haven't
that. Yeah,
you?
no, for sure. I did think as a working class person, you know, I'd read Dostoevsky and go, what? Is it great art is that which you cannot understand, you know? And so I thought, well, you have to stand on your toes and reach, and maybe one day out of 20 you'll do something. And then kind of labored under that for a while, and then at some point I had a breakthrough. I'd written this 700-page book. We were just married, didn't have any money, had 2 kids, and I was working as a tech writer, and I could sort of feel that dream of being a writer sailing away, gesturing at me obscenely. And I went to a friend's wedding in Mexico, and I told my wife, I came back and I said, you are sitting on a gold mine. I've got this novel, you know. So, all right. So I wrote this novel over the course of a year, stolen time, you know, late at night, falling asleep at the desk and going to my job. And at the end, I had 700 pages of this book called La Boda de Eduardo, which is like Ed's wedding, you know. And so I gave it to Paula to read and did that thing that writers do, which is to kind of say, oh, by the way, finish the novel. If you don't mind, whatever, you know. So she read it, or she didn't read it. she read
Well, yeah,
up to page.
describe
Yeah.
what happened.
Well, I joke about it now, but I had a lot on the line, and I gave it to her, said, you don't have to read it, and perched outside the door, and she was
Because you said you were going to go someplace.
Yeah, just whatever. Read it next week. I don't care. It's a masterpiece. And so I, waited like a little gargoyle outside the room, and she's sitting, honestly, she maybe made it to page 5, and she's like this. Because she knew what that had cost us as a family, and it was just an unworkable book, you know. So that was a bad day, I guess.
That would be sobering.
It wasn't, yeah. But then, I mean, artists in the audience will understand, it was so liberating, because when you write a book like that, you kind of know all along that something's off, that, you force through it. So when she had that reaction, I'm like, okay, I maybe I'm not a writer. It's perfectly fine. I give up. And then the next day I went into work, and I was working at an engineering company. I was a tech writer, which is kind of the lowest, rung. And I was supposed to be taking notes on a conference call. I'm sitting there kind of depressed, kind of elated in a way, and I just start writing these, just without even thinking about it, these little kind of scatological Dr. Seuss poems. Kind of a little pornographic, a little loose. And then
Just to amuse yourself, right?
I didn't even know I was doing it. It was just,
Yeah.
And then I would make a little cartoon and turn over. So I got that together, and I almost threw it away. I thought, no, that's kind of fun. Brought it home, put it on the table, went to play with the babies, and then I hear from the other room the most amazing sound, somebody responding with pleasure to my work.
You would never experienced
Not for a long
that.
time. It would have been a long time, all through grad school, you give somebody your story. I read your story. It was interesting. Oh, no, not interesting. It's clear you really worked hard on it, that kind of thing. But Paula was belly laughing at these things. And a little switch got thrown. And then about that time, I read Vonnegut and thought, aha, it's communication. It's not me being smarter and teaching, or me standing up here and demonstrating all my, travel or whatever. It's actual communication between two people. And that I knew how to do from being a person,
So you published a story. Let me make sure I've got the name of it right. I think it was one of your first publications, A Lack of Order in the Floating Object Room.
Yes.
That's what got you into grad school.
Yes, and that was actually before all of this we've been talking about.
So
yes.
what was it about that story, do you think, got Syracuse's attention?
Well, it was...
Because I read that story, and it was interesting.
Yeah. Oh, well, now, all right. It was... that story came to me literally in a dream, which doesn't... You don't usually want to do that, like the penguin sword fight. You don't need that story. But no, it came to me in a dream, and it was in that period, everything, I was just imitating Hemingway. I'd gone to work in Asia in the oil fields. I thought, that'll be great. Just do that in Hemingway's voice. And it wasn't working, and I had a dream in that peculiar voice, set in a kind of a theme park, and so it was just strange and kind of sort of comic, I guess, in a way. And it was just, I think now I can see it was kind of this beautiful thing where the subconscious was trying to give me a gift. Like you're being literal, you're imitating your hero, but none of you is in your work. Even at this point, there was a lot of financial things going on. And so in this kind of beautiful but strange way, the subconscious was saying, here, take this. If you can use this, please use it to get out of this.
I'm giving this to you.
And no, it really felt that way. And it happened one other time, years later. The New Yorker said, we're doing this 20 writers under 40. And I was 39 in 8 months or something at that point. And they said, and we'd like you to be in it. Do you have anything? I didn't have anything. So I sweated out a few things that wasn't working, and I was about to throw in a towel. And I had a dream. And in the dream, this girl that I used to date, and it didn't end well, she was in the dream, and she said, I just want you to know something. I have a baby now. I'm like, oh, I'm so glad. She goes, no, not just any baby. And in the dream, this baby comes crawling in, and he goes, it's quite true that we don't understand the full import of Einstein's findings.
The baby said this
to you in your dream? The baby said this. I'm like, well, you do have a baby. Holy cow, you know? And then I was like, no, I'm so happy for you. It's great. He's really smart. Oh, yeah, he's really... And then I looked down at the baby, and I noticed that there's a zipper on his head. This is my dream life. And I realized that the baby is actually a robot, or it's had some kind of chip put into its head to make it super intelligent. That's the dream. So I wake up and I'm like, aha.
I got it.
Yeah, and that was a story called I Can Speak. But it was a big story for me, and it really helped. So that, again, was the subconscious saying, yo, you poor literal idiot, have this, So,
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, props to you for paying attention.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there is a certain quality of those kind of dreams that is different from the one you think you should write and you shouldn't.
Yeah. But, so this first one, though, the floating objects one, it's in some sort of a theme park kind of thing. So many of your stories have either theme parks or amusement parks, and somebody is trapped in those amusement parks. Do you have some sort of a beef with amusement parks
Yeah.
and theme
Yeah, I
parks?
had a very deep experience at Disney World. No.
Because they're awesome.
Yeah.
They're hilarious. But I'm just wondering, many times we're there.
Yeah. Actually, for me, I mean, this is a little bit of a maybe too inside baseball, but when I was in the Hemingway mode, which really means, it's a kind of I think it's the default mode of American fiction, which is realism, in which you take the circumstances of your life and you slightly fictionalize them to make some point that you're already sure of. That's bad fiction, but that's kind of it. Like it's an encoded interpretation of your life with a kind of, I would say, too much control over it. So I was writing a lot of that kind of stuff. And at that time, it was Raymond Carver was very much in the air. So you'd have a story that was kind of terse, and at the end, it'd be some metaphor, like if there was a marriage, the willow in the yard would wilt or something, like that.
The dove dies.
Right, the dove died. Yeah. So I was really just trying to break myself out of that mode somehow. And what I noticed was you could take the stylistic approach of a kind of a realist, terse realist writer. If you put it in the Virgin Mary theme park, you're funny. And not only are you funny, but more importantly, your controlling mind that knows what you're trying to say gets disrupted. Because you put it in there and you're suddenly making jokes and everything gets destabilized. So in that's the moment when the sort of capitalist stuff and the stuff that was actually my real life started to come in. But it was almost like you had to kind of rip the curtain a little bit and it could come through. And so mechanically, if I just put a theme park in, or a ghost actually, it makes me unsure of what the story is about. And then what happens, you start listening to the story instead of telling it. So it's almost like a technique to just disrupt the conscious mind, I think.
Well, so that actually explains why I think, you tell me if I'm right, if so many of your stories begin like we're already underway. Mm-hmm. And I just wondered, do you actually start the story that way and see where it goes? Or do you like to just start the story, but you already knew kind of where this was
No,
going?
I mean, in the best world, I never know where it's going. That's
Wow.
My dream is to have just, in biology, the little seed crystal, and you start with that. And I'm kind of poking at it for language and for humor and for just something, certain sound, and then it grows naturally. And then at some point you go, oh, that's kind of like plot. Or this scene has made me ask a certain question, which the next one can answer. That's the best, because that's completely shorn of intention. The kind of intention where the writer says, oh, it's going to be about this. And the reader goes, oh, it's going to be about that. So this Einstein, I think, said, no worthy problem is ever solved on the plane of its original conception. So if I start to tell you a story and you think you know what it's about, and then it is, we're both bummed out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not very appealing.
No, it isn't. And so this goes back to the communication idea. If I say once upon a time, blah, 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 and you lean in, and what happens actually is the reader, will make kind of a short list of possibilities of where the thing is going. Mm-hmm. So then as a writer, you're trying to both acknowledge that and subvert it a little bit. So that's really why we feel we're in a relationship. I knew a producer one time, and he was talking about a certain actress. And he said that this person, depending on the angle from which she was shot, was either really beautiful or kind of strange looking. And somehow this producer said, that's why this person is a movie star. Because you look at her and you think, oh my God, she's so, Mm-hmm. And so even if the sound is off, your mind keeps going, what? I don't know what's happening. That's a great way to captivate somebody, is to be periodically clear and then suddenly come out of focus. So in a sense, I think that's the craft of the writer, is to try to be in it in a kind of, with a certain abandon that means that I am seeing you, I do care about you, but we're trying to have an adventure together. And that's tricky.
And it's an adventure that's already underway.
Yes.
In many of your stories.
Yes, and sometimes I'll just lop off the first half of a page. If I'm pretty, I was an engineer, so I'm pretty, I think of a story as kind of a machine, so I can kind of scan it and go, yeah, that first 3 paragraphs is pretty good, but actually it's not adding much. So if you take it out, you get the benefit of that extreme compression, that kind of in media res feeling, which I think is another part of the communication is, you know how when you're walking along and through an airport or something, you hear somebody say, "I will never speak to her again." You're like, "Oh my," and you kind of linger, you know.
Kind of lean in a little. Yeah.
So I think that's another kind of tool you can use. And it all is in the category of crediting the reader's intelligence. If I start at speed, and you almost like following a tour guide, you know, and I start at speed intriguingly, and you follow me, we're in a pretty good relationship. Whereas if I have a one-page epilogue that you're kind of like, yeah, come on, then we're a little bit out of relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, I love your stories so much, and I love your novels so much, but here's, for whatever reason, the one I felt most strongly about was your short story called The Falls. There was something about that so connected me, and here's a guy who's a nobody, and he knows it. And he's got this interior monologue that's going on about, you know, it's this self-recrimination, you know, he's just bagging on himself. And there's this other person that's in there who's so glad he's not that guy. and then wham, something happens and startles him out of this monologue. And he sees that he could be somebody else, or that he's about to be somebody else. One of the things I love about that story is that the reader has to fill in the outcome. So how did that come about where you didn't do the work for me? You made me do the work at the end.
Yeah.
I think he's different at the end.
Yeah. Well, on that one, well, I'll tell you the real. I mean, this. Sometimes I'm embarrassed to say how these actually happen because it's not
you're
a lot.
You're at a writer's symposium. We want to hear these things.
Yeah. But it's not. It's not. In my position, I'm not really thinking about meaning much at all. I'm thinking about almost like a roller coaster designer. I want there to be shocks, and I want there to be. So in that one, I'd finished my first book, which is all theme park stories in the first person, and I wanted to do something a little more expansive. So I just started narrating this kind of monkey mind that I have for sure. And I do it in something I think of now as third-person ventriloquist, which is I'm in this, I say, Frank walked down the street, and as soon as I can, I want to get into Frank's voice. It's a third person, but I'm really using his diction and his mindset. So that was this first guy. And so I wrote that, and I had a lot of fun with it. He's a very neurotic guy, set that aside. Oh, that was fun. I'll write another one. So I wrote another monologue, which was the second guy. Neurotic in a different flavor. He's a poet, I think, you know, if I remember right. So I had those two things, and oh God. And I literally just said, let's put them in the same story. Why? Just because. It's the same idea as a theme park. If you disrupt your conscious mind by putting two unlike things together, the mind in revision will make them organic. So, and the only trick I had to do was I had them walk on the same path at different times, and they passed a disaster, basically. So then, what happens to me is I'm a really obsessive reviser, and so in that story, a lot of it was just when do they switch speakers, and at the end, I had overwritten it to where you would know what happened, and I thought that's not really as interesting, and also I'm not sure that. There was an element, I don't want to give, there was an element of chance in it. This guy jumps into a river and we don't know if he's going to live or not. I didn't know either. No one could know, actually. It would depend on the river, really, you know. So therefore, the meaning of the story had nothing to do with whether he lived or not. It had to do with whether he jumped or not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was, I'm being confronted with something. Will I do it?
Yeah.
And will I survive it?
Right, and the story was about him. He's a very good family man. He loves his children, and he sees someone else's children in peril. Will he jump or not? And the case has been made that he shouldn't, and the case has been made that he should.
Exactly.
So the story is such a beautiful form because you have to be very aware of what's the meaning I'm nurturing here. And the meaning of that was not, is he a good swimmer? You know, and the meaning actually isn't even, will he save those two girls? The meaning is, would he jump? And the highest meaning is, it doesn't matter. Well, it matters. He does jump, but we don't know about the outcome. So the story is a very strange form because it looks like it's about one thing, but as Joyce said, there's the surface action and there's the understory. And in that one, it was kind of, I think, both men were in their own way kind of selfish. And we got the picture that that one was at least selfish in service of his family. So at the critical moment, that's, anyway, but yeah.
Love that story.
Thanks.
Absolutely love that story.
It was fun to write, and then I went to read it at a thing, and right before, because it's very monkey, there's a lot of monkey mind in there, and right before I read it, I thought, I wonder if I'm the only person who thinks this way. And then I read it, and it was clear that I wasn't. That people,
a lot of monkeys.
Yeah, a lot of monkeys in their room.
Yeah, I want to go back to your corporate world writing experience, because that was your early life. I've just got this picture in my mind that you've of your account of your car has died, your wife is on bed rest because of a complicated pregnancy. Mm-hmm. It's winter in upstate New York, and you're riding your bike to work.
Yes.
Composing sentences.
Yes, and not only that, I had these winter boots that had an astronaut on them.
An astronaut?
Yeah, I don't know why. We were trying to, I had to ride my bike in the winter.
Did they glow?
No, just like little decals of astronauts. I don't know, I was 38 years old, I don't know. But yeah, no, I mean, it was, yeah. And so I would ride to work, and it was actually one of the most beautiful times, because we had, depending when you drop in, 1 or 2 daughters, and we had a little house, and we, in love, and in a certain way, I kind of was okay with the fact that I probably wouldn't be a writer, which is very sweet in a way. Like I was,
but you're going to be stuck in this corporate thing, which was going to keep you from being a writer, because now you have 2 kids.
Kind of, but also I've got this corporate thing.
Yeah,
and I've got insurance, and at that point, it was like, okay, if I don't screw up, I can have something like a middle-class life for our daughters. That was huge. So I went from kind of like, I'm Jack Kerouac too, I don't care about anything, to like, Leave It to Beaver, and I love these people so much, please don't let me fail them. So that job was a godsend, and I was very reverent about it. I was good at it. But meanwhile, I'm writing to work, and I thought, if I could just write one story a year that gets published for the next 10 years, I'll be 44 or whatever I was, and I think I could maybe have a book, a small book. And so it was very sweet, and sometimes there were days when I couldn't write, fine. Other days when the writing was on the way to work, just memorizing 3 sentences and trying to refine them as I wrote. And then other times, this was back in the days of WordPerfect. Anybody remember that one? Yeah. So I had set my desk up to be kind of maximum number of steps from the doorway. And so I would steal some time every day, depending on the workload. So I'd have the story up, and I'd be happy, like, oh, I'm doing it. And if somebody walked in, I'd have to hit Shift F3, which toggled the screen, and then change my posture, like, So I wrote a whole book like that,
So you were physically toggling, not just on the screen, but you were going up
and I didn't even know I was doing it, but I would always try to look a little bit like, oh gosh, this technical report that I'm doing right now at work is so hard,
So funny. You also mentioned showing your manuscript to your wife. That's risky to show.
Have you shown your manuscripts to my wife?
She liked mine better. So I actually tell students, don't do it. Yeah. Don't show a romantic partner what you've written, because it's going to go one of 2 ways. Yeah. One is they're going to go, I liked it, and that's not helpful, or I didn't like it, and now you have to break up with that person.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a calculated risk on your part.
Well, my wife is a very wonderful reader, and we met in grad school. We got engaged in 3 weeks in the romantic Syracuse ambiance, and we've been married, I think, 38 years now.
Good for you.
She's a great, yeah, I think.
Yeah.
But she's written 2 wonderful novels, and so we, looking back, it's so sweet. We were both in the program. She was a year ahead of me, and we would drive around and just argue about writers. Oh no, you can't possibly prefer that writer. Just kind of lively. And then she's just someone who we have shared, I think, spiritual interests. So she was raised in an evangelical family in Rapid City, and I was a very Catholic kid, and so. And of course, around our kids, we were always one one mind. And so with her, it's I would never try to publish without showing her. And
Sure.
I wait very late in the game to where I think it's finished. And then she has, and, I know her so well that if she has even like a slight, like, "Hey, yeah," then I have to go back. But like when I finished Lincoln and the Bardo, I gave her the first third because it's a weird book and it's kind of risky. And I was a little, I didn't know. I thought it was good, but I wasn't sure. Gave her the first third, and she wrote me a little Post-it note that I still have that I don't share the content of. But that's why I went on, So it's an incredible gift that I have with her.
We all need people like that in our lives, but you're lucky to have somebody that you live with.
Very lucky, yeah. And who knows me? If I, like I have, I like to be funny. And sometimes that can be a little facile. And I also am kind of sentimental. That can go wrong. So she's somebody who really knows me well to say, this is 10% too easy. Or I had a story called Pastoralia, and we had a school bill coming up. And I'm like, I think I should sell that to the New Yorker for money, And it was too long because they have a limit. So I just lopped off a bunch of sections using my engineer brain, And she read it, and she said, "You ruined it. You took all the funny stuff out of it." She was absolutely right. So that, to have that kind of person in your life is really the best, valuable.
One of the themes, it seems like, throughout your stuff is the harshness of the world with these glimpses of beauty kind of sprinkled in. And your stories remind me of a line. I have a favorite writer who's also from upstate New York, Frederick Buechner, who says, "Here is the world. Beautiful and terrible things are going to happen. You don't have to be afraid." Your stuff reminds me of that Buechner line.
I've never heard that's beautiful. Thank you for that.
Yeah. So that's intentional, though, right? Because in your kind of worldview, the world is a harsh place.
It is, but also, writers have limits. So for me, those early stories, the very early stories, a lot of my positive feelings about life came out too much. They weren't supported. They were just a little, like I really used to like Khalil Gibran and kind of cheerful, So the early stories were working too hard to emphasize the positive. Then when I hit this period we talked about earlier, the sort of hidden fears I had about life, and I think it's some idea that it actually is very harsh came out. But in those early works, I kind of felt like I'm not quite doing justice to the beauty. I mean, I had a lovely family life, and that's a harder task, actually. Somebody said happiness writes white. It's technically hard to do justice to human friendship, love. So I think for me, it's kind of it's the thing I'm really excited about going ahead is, can I get that mix right? Because life is incredibly harsh. And sometimes, as you get older and you get lucky, you think the harshness has vanished, Or you also think that somehow luck is related to your virtue, which is another fallacy. So I think somehow there's a vision I want to get that fully credits. I had a beautiful day here today, because this is an incredible community. And to meet your students and your faculty, last day of my tour, my heart is very full right now, and you're an amazing person, as you know. So that's true, And at the same time, very sad things are true. A great artist can get both of those. I haven't got there yet, but that's kind of my aspiration.
Well, you've got this image, though, that you've said where in your work you like to visualize good and evil like these two football players in a peewee football game.
Yeah.
Where they've got all their pads on and they just run at each other.
Yeah.
And so that's what you do, right?
Yes, I hope so. But also now I'm getting a little tricky with myself, because I'm starting to realize that they're both on the same team.
Whoa.
In other words, I don't think that evil wakes up in the morning and goes, yeah.
Who can I screw up today?
No, I don't. I think it's going to be a great day. I'm going to close down the border, or whatever. So yeah. But so to me, that's an interesting thing to think, okay, what if we disallowed the easy binary good evil? Then what do we see? How do people get into positions where they are actually doing things that we can call evil, but to them it doesn't look like it? That's a kind of, but even in, some of the earlier stories, I think that energy is working,
To not see them as evil takes a little bit of humility on our part, wouldn't you say?
100%. And it takes, yes, and clarity. You have to say, you also have to say we're on a spectrum of sorts, As one of the things you learn as a writer is you can imagine pretty much anybody. If you said to me, do a 90-year-old, very bitter woman who can barely move, I can do that. I've had sore knees, I've been pissed off, and I've gone from being 20 to being 67. Just turn up the volume in each of those, and there she is. Edamame,
Edamame Saunders.
Yeah, edamame, or whatever. But, when I was a Catholic kid, it was in Chicago. The nuns, actually, I joke, but they were amazing, and they were also kind of Dorothy Day era progressive teachers. And I don't know if it came from them, but I had an idea as a young kid that Jesus had this quality of being kind of a novelist in a sense, in that he was so, his phenomenon were so pure that when he saw you, he almost was you. He had no projection. He just loved. And therefore, when he interacted with you, he inflected you in the most positive way.
So the image of God in him reflected the image of God in me,
Yes.
and they saw each other.
Yes, and like the woman at the well.
Right.
But also the money changers. So I don't think he was angry the way we would be angry. But in Buddhism, they would say he was a wrathful teacher. So that got into me as an aspiration to be able to, not to be like that, but to write like that, to say, okay, let me put this character here and try to identify my projections and my intentions and get rid of those and just see the person. The superpower, if you could do it, and it does kind of destabilize good, evil, right, wrong for at least the space of the story.
But you make it really clear in your stories that the world actually doesn't care whether you survive it or not, whether you do well or not, whether the abyss finally opens and swallows you up.
Yes, sometimes, in certain situations it doesn't care. Now, the part I'm not as good at is in certain situations it cares beautifully. So in some of the stories in 10th of December, I started to kind of go, oh, I'm getting it. Like in the title story, there's a moment at the end where the community kind of does come together for the guy. So it's for me, it's a beautiful craft because it leads you morally in a certain way. And as you do it more and more, you start to understand parts of your own mind a little bit. So I've always believed that community is real, but I was having trouble getting it into the stories. And then here it comes just on its own,
So you spent most of your career writing short stories and essays and things, and then Lincoln in the Bardo comes along, and you wondered if this was going to be a career killer. Yeah. Why?
Lincoln. I'm writing a novel about Lincoln. Okay, go ahead.
Who hasn't?
Yeah, it's on South Park,
Yeah.
No, I mean, part of it was that I'd written that book 10th of December, and I really enjoyed writing it. And but many years before, when our kids were little, we went to D.C., and we were driving past that cemetery, and my wife's cousin said, "Did you know that Willie Lincoln was buried in that crypt?" I said, "Who's Willie Lincoln?" I didn't know. And then she explained that the newspapers had said that Lincoln had actually been so grief-stricken that he went into the tomb. Wow. And so as a young father, that was moving. It was also back during the Clinton era, not even just the idea that somebody could leave the White House on their own on this kind of mission was fascinating. I thought, that would be a great novel for somebody. Because my skill set at that point did not encompass a book like that. So I just said, okay, well, let's not mess anything up. Your career just started, and I knew I was getting successful because of these funny short stories. So I let it go. And I researched it a little bit, and I tried to write a play, and I just kept saying, don't do that, because it's sort of like the thing a person would do at that stage in their career when they got arrogant. you know, and I could just read the reviews, you know, so I didn't do it. And then at one point, the 10th of December came out. It was a big success, bigger than I ever imagined. And I just thought, wow, I do not want to be the guy whose gravestone reads, avoided that which he most longed to do, you know. And I really I thought, hey, I should try it. And so I gave myself basically a little 6-month contract. I said, just try it. And if it's stupid, no one ever has to know. And that gave me the freedom. So it was partly that it had to be, I knew, a little more earnest than I was used to doing. It also had to be a 19th century voice, which is not really what I was known for. So I did it 6 months, and I gave it to Paula. And she wrote me that note, and I said, okay, we'll do it.
Keep going.
Yeah.
One of the things I so admire about that novel is the fact that you went from short story to writing that, because you said you can't cling to the thing that got you in the door. You can't just keep being a short story writer forever.
Right.
You got to take the risk of doing the novel.
Yes, but that's terrifying, especially because my first book didn't come out until I was 38. And I just barely, you know, figured that out. And suddenly my dream was coming true. And then you're like, okay, I don't want to do anything.
Let's ramp it up a little.
Yeah. And it was years later. And it felt really, you know, really wonderful to you know, to sort of broaden your stance a little bit and try something else.
And now it's being made into a movie with Tom Hanks.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, it is.
I mean, is it okay for us to?
Oh, yeah. No, then we announced it last week. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then Vigil comes along, which, as I recall, you said it just started with an idea.
Yeah, it was just, it's a little hazy, but it was basically just one, at 67, the thought that, like, well, how did I do, you know? And then I was thinking about kind of that generation of people who maybe are in their 80s now, who were instrumental in the kind of first rhetoric of climate denial, which interestingly I found out came right from the tobacco industry. Same people in some cases. So I thought, just again, as that kind of a possible career-killing challenge, what if I took some climate change denier and put him on his deathbed? Stinker dies. You know, that was it. And so that was really the start of it. And then, so it just kind of went from there.
So those novels, and even one of your early short stories, they involve spirits from the world beyond this one. Tolstoy did that. Dickens did it. It's a Wonderful Life did it.
Yeah.
Christmas Carol, all that. So have you ever been visited by a spirit?
Once.
What happened?
Yeah. Well, actually, it's not funny. It's kind of funny, but my grandfather, actually, he died in 1969, and he had just retired, and it was I was supposed to go to the Cubs Sox game. They had it once a year. They had a Cubs Sox. Mm-hmm. So my dad and I were going to go, and then at the last minute, he said, I can't go. The neighbor will take you. So we went, had a good time. And I came back to find my dad crying, and his father had passed away the night before, but he didn't want to ruin my night. So he held off, and he told me afterwards. And so either that night, I think it was actually the next night, I'm just in bed, and I wake up, and I think, oh, he's here. And there was a kind of a dark mass at the end of the bed, not frightening, but not him, but I knew it was him. And the whole vibe was just, it's all good. I'm fine, and you're going to be fine. And I thought,
what a gift.
And I thought, am I asleep? And I'm not, and he's still there. And the reason I believe it, because it's only happened that one time. Never. Have you ever had an experience like that?
I have, but it was an evil one.
Oh.
I was in Mumbai, India. I had gone into the wrong neighborhood and got overwhelmed by this really. I've never talked publicly about this, by the way. And that night, in my room, I got attacked by something.
Physically, you felt it physically. Yeah.
So when I read your thing about spirits and spirits entering into someone, I've been, I had something.
Amazing. There's a book called, I think it's by Patricia Pearson. I think it's called Opening Heaven's Door, I think. And her sister had an experience. She had terminal cancer, a young woman with children. She was just despondent. What's going to happen? This can't be happening to me. And so she had a dream, and in the dream, her father, who lived a few blocks away, took her around and showed her the universe, and showed her that her children, the future of each child, everything's fine. And she woke up just totally at peace with her death. Her father had died the night before. So Patricia Pearson's a science writer, and she's like, "This is my
How
sister.
can this be?
My sister's not a hoo-hoo kind of person, woo-hoo, whatever it is." So she said, "I'm going to use my scientific training to look into this." So she interviewed a bunch of people, always with in the same mindset she would interview anybody. Eliminated the goofy things, and she concluded 50% of people, if they talk to you frankly, have had some kind of experience at the moment of crossover, or like you had, or like I had. So that's exciting. It just means that there's something. We don't know what it is, but there's something. Yeah.
So how did having kids affect you as a writer? Because there are a lot of people who feel like, oh, I got to wait until my kids are adults and out of the house, or others get up early in the morning, before the kids get up. How did it affect you?
The main thing was I just fell in love with with Paula and with them, and like I had this feeling of I am protecting this pod at all costs. And the other thing that happened was suddenly, I had always been a pretty nice person, but when we had them, I just went, oh my God, everybody is beloved, or should be. So whatever, the feeling I had for them, there's some old guy on a bus bench saying, oh my God, he was a baby, I hope his dad loved him as much as that whole kind of corny, but the universe got infused with moral feeling. So whereas before the kids, I couldn't really figure out how to make a story matter, except I would, like by Hemingway, I would put something that he had done, or, something. Suddenly there was meaning everywhere. Even, because if you have that feeling about the world, even a small slight is a major moral thing. And I started to feel that. So the stories could be a little smaller. Humiliation was a real thing. There's a beautiful Chekhov story called Grief. I don't know if you've read it, but it's a guy who's, he's a very poor sort of horse-drawn cab driver in Moscow, and he just found out that his son has died. And the whole story is very simple. It's just him going around trying to tell somebody, and he's just a cab driver. At one point, somebody hits him in the back of the head, mind your business, So at the end of the whole thing, no one has hurt him. And he goes back to the stable, and he puts the horse away, and he just touches his head to the horse's snout and said, I had a son. He died, Beautiful, huge story, but nothing happens except that. So I was more attuned to that energy once we had our kids.
Yeah, and plus it focuses, you have this much time, because something else is
Yes.
taking time away.
Well, especially if you're writing at work, which I was. So it's a good joke, but also it was, if you at one point I had gotten a nice rejection from the New Yorker, which it was at Dear George, we reject this, but it's us writing to tell you we reject it. Oh my God, victory!
I got a note from them.
Yeah. So I was kind of elated, and I made the mistake of telling my boss. And he actually, I'd never heard this construction before that, but he said, George, man, we're going to have to ask you to stop using corporate resources to do your story thingies. What is that?
Story thingies.
Story thingies. I'm like, all right, you just gave me a grant for the arts. You watch how sneaky I am now. But yeah, but the beauty of that was I'd come out of grad school where, sometimes you have too much time. So you're going to research. What were cannons made of in 1740? Who cares? So
I have 30 minutes before I have to do this.
Or less. Sometimes it would literally just, okay, I've got a meeting in 10 minutes. I've got a charge number. I can bill this time. Go. And so that brought out the entertainer. You just had to get. And then also, I tell this to people who are in this situation where they don't have any time. You can make progress in 3 minutes. We have this idea you have to have 6 hours and incense burning, and but really, if you're pushed, you can, if you can do 4 good lines, that's pretty good. Over the course of a year, that's a lot. So to sort of say it, a lot of what I do as a writer is just anxiety reduction, and say, okay, well, you can only write 3 minutes a day. go ahead, you know. And so to me, that takes some of the pressure off of having to create the perfect condition.
Sure.
Yeah.
Which I think just comes with maturity and practice and,
Yeah.
and life experience. So you've got this great story, Mom of Bold Action, where everything is a possible writing prompt
Yeah.
for her. You know, famous writer comes to writer's symposium. You know, is that a prompt?
Yeah, right.
Well, so my question is do you think that way? That
No.
everything is a possible?
I used to.
Really?
Yeah, but none of them ever worked out. Literally, you know, a story in which, yeah, that's the conscious mind going, you know. And then whenever I would come up with it, I'd always supply an ending, and well, don't bother. But in that story, she's very sweet because she's desperate to write a story, and so she, you know, she thinks about she's thinking about a talking fork in there, you know, But what she does is she overdetermines that, you know, she won't write the story unless she's sure she can finish it, which that's a death knell. You have
Never
to
going to happen.
No, because then you finished it, and why should we bother?
You know, you've also written some really, really important nonfiction stuff. Your account of driving the entire length of the U.S.-Mexico border for GQ, that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And living among unhoused people up in Fresno, outside of Fresno, in your tent city story. Do you ever feel like I need to get back into that, or even do you want to drive that border again?
Yeah, I did. The last one I did, I went to cover the Trump rallies in 2016. Mm-hmm. That was the last time, and that one kind of stung me a little bit. It was it's not natural. That form isn't really natural for me because I don't know. It takes me a lot of time to write those pieces, and in that case, it was kind of. I have a lot of people in my family and circle who are kind of right wing, and so. And to go into those rallies, people were quite affable, actually, you know, kind of fun in a way. And I would say, I'm a liberal, left of Gandhi. They'd go, okay, you know. And we had nice talks and arguments, and it was, you know. And then when I came to write it, I couldn't quite figure out the angle. I couldn't quite do it. So this is how. So I said, okay, I'll write it as an opera libretto. And I had a commission from the New Yorker, so I'm going to write this out. So in the opera that I wrote, the Trump supporter, and I used all their actual quotes. I had them all stockpiled. So I had them singing, the Trump supporters singing, you know, close the border, you know, whatever. And then overhead, all the pro-immigration people I'd met were flying overhead singing. You know, ridiculous. So I had the panache to send this to David Remnick. And then there was a few days silence. And he's such an amazing mind. And he at one point, he wrote me an email, while I respect your attempts at equity, or that's not the word you use, but like fairness.
Equanimity.
Yeah, equanimity, yeah. I feel you're avoiding the difficult task of analysis. Like, ooh. Yeah. So, but it took that, and then I finally thought, okay, I have to have an opinion, you know. So anyway, I love that kind of piece because the beautiful thing is whatever idea you bring to a thing like that, go to Fresno and live incognito in those camps, your ideas get decimated in the first day. It's always more complicated than you thought. I'm afraid. I thought it was going to be like Steinbeck. I'm going to play guitar and we're going to, you know,
this land is your land.
Oh,
that kind of,
yeah, no, that didn't happen. There's two different crack dealerships in there, and this woman came up to me and she goes, "How long are you going to be here?" I said, "A week." She goes, "I'm going to rape you." I'm like, you know, so, they're beautiful experiences because I come in with my little whatever liberal ideas, and within a day I'm just like, oh, I don't know anything, and that's beautiful. You take it down to nothing and start observing, and in that mode, because your concepts are gone, you're observing really sharply, and things are beautifully funny. And I was laying in this camp at night, and it was very frightening because it was kind of a question of how long it would be before they realized I was reporting. And so I'm lying in this camp. I'm just terrified, and you can hear fights breaking out and people coming in to buy crack. And I'm lying there, and I'm like, I've got to get out of here. And then suddenly I hear from the next tent. And then a guy goes, "Can you hear me now?" Of course.
There's the Pee Wee football game. Those two, good and evil, are running at
You
each other.
couldn't make it up. It was so beautiful. I mean, Robert Stone, the writer, talked about the difference between beautiful and sublime. Beautiful, beautiful. A bouquet is beautiful. Sublime, he said, was he was on a Coast Guard ship, and they were firing rockets into Vietnam, and these beautiful tracers. And it was beautiful, except they were killing people. But you couldn't deny the power of it, so he's used the word sublime. So those experiences, sometimes when your judging mind or your analytical mind goes away, you're open to the sublime, like that farting story.
I don't know that we've referred to that particular biological function before in the Writers' Symposium. So thank you.
Well,
thank you for that.
I try to be a breaker of the rules.
Yeah. You've also compared writing to archery. And here's what do you remember? Or do you want me to tell you what you said?
Yeah, tell me.
That the first draft, the arrow just lands where it lands, as opposed to aiming for the target.
Yes.
You see where this is going?
Yeah, now I do. Yes.
Okay, so make the comparison.
Well, so I think a lot of times the younger writers they know what they want to do, and that's the aiming. You aim, and so that doesn't usually work, because again, if I am aiming for something, you feel me controlling you in a certain way. So whereas if you just shoot and then react to where the shot lands, that's a more honest approach. So in other words, I might think I'm writing a story about A. In doing it, I kind of botch it up, but with a good reason. I hit a funny riff, and it goes over here. So then you have a choice. Do I take that funny riff and get rid of it so that the story will do what I told it to do? No. Or do I say, oh, it's a different story than I thought? And that's the more powerful thing. So the whole process of writing is kind of call and response. You do something maybe with an intention, but then you see what you did, and then you go, okay, story, you're in charge. I'm going to do what you want me to do. And I think that's where that communication feels like, because you feel it yourself as you're reading me. Oh, the story's going over there, and oh no, he's following it, so we're in connection.
Yeah, I mean, I felt that so much in your story, 10th of December. In fact, I actually thought I should put this in my will, where if I'm dying, I want somebody to read 10th of December to me, because it's such a hopeful, elevating experience, because it went somewhere I didn't think it was going to go, and it was just so hopeful, and it was just this story that was awful and painful and lonely and desperate, and then loving.
Thank you. That's because that's the experience I had writing it.
Oh my.
Yeah, I didn't know. I just thought a guy with a terminal diagnosis decides to kill himself.
Yeah.
And the reason I had that is because a relative of mine got the diagnosis, and I thought, oh my God. Basically you think, I'm so glad that'll never happen to me. Well, they will. And I thought, okay, well, if it does, what would I do? And I thought, and I just read To Build a Fire. That's, and Jack London makes that freezing to death sound pretty good. So I thought, okay, when I get the diagnosis, I'll go into the woods, and that all happened in a split second. And I thought, no, you wouldn't do that, because that would break your family's heart. There was the whole blueprint for the story. But so then you first have to get the guy into the woods, and then that took up maybe a year to write that story. And every time you're revising behind you, the reality is becoming more true to you, and then different options open up than you would have thought of at the beginning. And so by the time I got to that point, I loved that guy so much, and his dilemma had been so internalized by me that I could see what the actual issue was. And so it's a beautiful thing to. It
was so moving, and seriously, I just wanted to call you and thank you when I finished reading that. It was so powerful.
Thank you for telling me that.
So you have talked about writing as a spiritual practice, and what I so admire about that approach is that I think, rather than thinking about is there a market for this, you talk about it of as just doing the writing is all that matters. The rest will kind of take care of itself. I mean, you can say that now because you're a successful writer, you've got a movie with Tom Hanks and all that sort of stuff. But I actually believe you that it's the writing that matters, not the outcome.
It's true, although in the spirit of symposium honesty, it flickers on and off.
Okay,
No,
that's fair.
I mean, and I think that's legit. In other words, like I can be in a story, even like that one you're talking about, and be so deep into it, and something reveals itself, and I get it, and I think, ooh, the New Yorker is going to love this.
Sure,
Truly,
fair enough.
and then that flickers off, and you go, yeah, okay, and then come back to it. So I think the whole thing, spiritual practice. I think there are real spiritual practices that are more powerful than writing, but writing comes in there, and I think the main thing is to be in honest relation to the situation you made, to get clear of your plans about it, and then know that you're over there reading. This precious person here who's seen a few things is reading it, and together we're really exploring. And if I leave something on the table in the name of my agenda or some sentimentality, you're going to feel that. And you're not going to want me to read that to you when you're dying. You're going to want some other stupid story, and I can't live with that. But so that is spiritual, and it's but I think early on I knew that from reading, for example, Chekhov, that if you did the work of loving the form and loving your reader, then it would be successful in some way.
So you also have this line that says, if someone could demonstrate that fiction did no good, I would still do it because I think it does good for me. That's where I think it's a spiritual practice.
Yeah. Well, and this is funny. They had a story called Winky. And in the story, there's a guy who he feels like his life is no good. He goes to a self-help seminar, and this guy is kind of a charlatan. And his thing is, don't let anyone crap in your oatmeal. That's his,
That's just good. Yeah. That's just good.
That's it. So this guy in the story he's got his sister living with him who's kind of not all there, and she's super religious, and so he becomes convinced that she's crapping in his oatmeal, and she's got to go live somewhere else. So we're watching this, and meanwhile we're cutting in with scenes of her, and she's such a sweetheart, and she adores him. So the last scene is he goes home, and he's gonna tell her, and
he's asserting himself.
Yeah, and he sees her face, and he can't do it, and and then the kind of coda is he's beating himself up because he's not strong enough. But we're so happy. So that's the story, and I think it's okay. So a week later, I get an email, dear Mr. Saunders, I loved your story in the New Yorker. Oh, thank you. It really helped me clarify some things in my life. Oh, good. Go on. My 71-year-old mother is quite good for her age, but I think she needs to be in an old folks' home. Your story convinced me to put her there. I'm like, what?
You were kind of going for the opposite. But
No, exactly. So I write him back, dear sir, thank you so much. Well, I gave him the whole exegesis of the story, really like a 4-page explanation. And he writes back, thanks so much for your response. All done. So this is a case where my story, now he was in error, but but still, I don't. What's my point? I feel I'm thinking about that woman, but in other words, in that case, you can't predict what the world is going to make of your work, really. So I think I would do it anyway. Yeah.
So we have a lot of people who are aspiring writers in our audience and who are watching. You got some advice for them?
Yeah, and I met some of them today, and they were wonderful. Oh my goodness. The biggest thing I would say is start with the assumption that what you have is valid. It's common, and I remember myself as a young writer, you'd make a story that didn't work, and you're like, I'm no good. I haven't lived enough. I haven't read enough. I don't know anything, blah, blah, blah. Rather than that, I would say your subconscious has just given you a gift. It's complicated. It's maybe a little bit knotted up. It's okay. What if we assume that it was your subconscious was trying to communicate with you. And instead of seeing it as an obstruction, seeing it as a beautiful complication or manifestation of who you are. This, I mean, I sometimes think of this in terms of talking to your own story, because if your story is, you're reading along and suddenly it gets no good, the normal human response is say, oh, I screwed up.
I'm no good.
I should go to law school, whatever. And that's normal, but the more advancing is to sort of say to the story, what's happening? And the story will say, nothing, it's fine, keep going. Tell me. And the story eventually will start to reason with you a little bit, and it'll tell you in its own language what's wrong, because you already know. And then you can make peace with it. So I would say that, but the simple advice is trust that revision in your flavor, once you discover it, is the key to the kingdom. Nobody writes a first draft that's good. Nobody. People always say they do, but they don't. So the idea that you could take something that you made that you don't love, but by applying sort of a form of love to it over and over again, it would reshape itself. Your friend with the story is not an enemy, and revision is the way that you assure it of your friendship, essentially.
George Saunders, thank you for coming to the Writers' Symposium.
It was such a pleasure.